back to Classic Vinyl Podcast. We're ready for side 2 of A Hard Day's Night.
Yes, we are. I'm Tyler.
And I'm Justin. So, of course, last week we did side 1 of A Hard Day's Night, and this week we're going to do side 2. So are you ready to get to side 2 of the album, Tyler?
I am so just chomping at the bit to get to side 2.
Side 2.
Okay, so side 2 opens up pretty quick with Any Time at All. Written by Lennon McCartney, mainly written by John Lennon. It's sang mostly by John Lennon. Of course, you've got McCartney singing some of these high notes that Lennon couldn't hit.
Anytime at all. It's up there.
So, what are your thoughts on Any Time at All? How do you think that opens up side 2?
It opens up so well. It's a hard open, which was something that I really like, is when they just bust right into the lyrics. They do that a lot on this album. These guys are just kind of like a bull charging out of the gates. And as soon as you throw that gate open, here we go. We're off to a great start. Last week, we finished up the first side with Can't Buy Me Love. Now we're on to Anytime at All. In the journey of our young man who's going, on this quest for love, it seems like he's figuring out that being there for other people is a better way to show love and more likely to win a return on that love that you're showing. So he's figuring it out. I'm happy for this young man, and this is a fun song. It's a real sweet message that, hey, I'm here for you anytime at all. Anytime you need anything, you just, call my name. I'll be there. And it's real sweet. And then, boy, I love that last chord. What did you think about that one, Justin?
I think this song is an excellent way to open, let's say, an album or side 2 of an album. I love it with that big drum hit, and it goes right into the chorus. Like you said, a hard open, like many of the songs are on this. I think this song is probably the most underrated song on this album. I really enjoy Lennon's strained vocals. I really like the part McCartney kicks in because the high vocal really kind of plays off of Lennon's vocal, because Lennon starts the song and then you got Paul going into that high. And once again, this song's got great bass, great drums in it. It's got the big drum hit like at the first. It's got that at the very first of every chorus, which I really enjoy. I've always really liked this song, and it's not one of the bigger Beatles hits by any means. It wasn't released as a single or anything, but I think this is probably the most underrated song on the album.
If there's any song on this album that should have been a single, it's this one.
Yeah, it's a good song. So that moves us to the second song on side 2, I'll Cry Instead. Another Lennon-McCartney composition, primarily written by John Lennon. Now, this was written for the movie originally by Lennon, but Dick Lester, the director, didn't like it as well, especially once he heard McCartney's Can't Buy Me Love. He decided to replace it with that, which I think that was probably a pretty good choice.
I'd say, yeah.
Yeah, they did release I'll Cry Instead as a single on June 26th of 1964. It reached number 22 in the U.S. and number 16 in Canada. It did not chart in the U.K.
It's because it was beat out by Can't Buy Me Love.
Something like that. But this song's about Lennon's frustration with success and his loss of freedom, possibly his difficulties he was having with Cynthia, his current wife at the time. It's hard to say, or maybe it was just written about a bunch of hogwash like Lennon claims they were. Now, this song was recorded the same day as the song Matchbox and the song Slow Down. What are your thoughts of I'll Cry Instead?
It's sad. He's lost that girl that he found, and I'm gonna go, no, the poor guy. He gets that determination, that can-do attitude where he says, you'd better hide all the girls, because I'm gonna be coming back, and then, I'm just gonna go and cry for a little bit, but I'll be back. Then you gotta hide the girls, because evidently he's a predator. I don't know. But it's a sweet song. I mean, for a...
Maybe he was kind of forewarning of the success and what the Beatles would do. And I mean, because you think about it, he'll be coming back, and
he will be back because she's not going to keep him down,
because he'll break their hearts all around the world.
Oh, yeah.
And he kind of did. All of them did.
Oh, didn't they? Boy, these guys. And, for being some rather plain-looking guys from Liverpool, they took the world by storm and made everybody fall in love with them. A whole generation of people who are now gray-haired and aging fell in love with them. And it was amazing. Quite a phenomenon. So what are your thoughts on I'll Cry Instead, Justin?
It's definitely not my favorite on the album. I think replacing it on the movie with Can't Buy Me Love was a good choice.
For sure.
it is pretty upbeat music, but kind of a funny plot to the story, I guess, because he's sad, but you know what? He's going to come back and break all their hearts, which maybe he did. I don't know. I think it's got good, thick bass. That's really the only thing that really stands out to me on this song. It's got a decent Lennon vocal, but nothing really sticks out to this song. It's one of the weaker songs on the album, but a song I still enjoy quite a bit.
Yeah.
So that moves us on to Things We Said Today. Another Lennon-McCartney composition. This one was written primarily by Paul McCartney. He apparently wrote this while on vacation with Jane Asher aboard a yacht in the Virgin Islands. That's what he has said. Now, I don't know if that's what he said back then or if that's what he's remembering now, because sometimes those things are different. But this was released as the B-side single of Hard Day's Night in the UK in 1964, July of 1964. So McCartney has described this song as basically being nostalgic about the moment they were living in at the time. And he had a sense of melancholy that their lifestyles may drive him and Asher apart eventually. And I don't know that's because of his success or what was going on. I'm not sure there. But this song did share #1 spot for 21 weeks with a Hard Day's Night single. So what are your thoughts on Things We Said Today?
This one, it's a different sound than the rest of the album, but then again, there's a couple other songs on here that also have different sounds, so it fits. This one, I like this song. It's not really grabbing me like some other songs on this album, but it's not bad at all. I like the different sound and that sense of melancholy. It really captures that. I mean, you can really, knowing that background, you can really picture Paul McCartney with his girlfriend on a yacht in the Virgin Islands, so the music really captures that scene along with the lyrics. It's being nostalgic for that time. Like, things we said today may be lost and gone tomorrow. Yeah, enjoy the moment while you're living in it. It's sweet. What are your thoughts on it?
This song's really tough for me because as far as musically, I think it's got a very steady beat with a decent thick bass in it. Mm-hmm. Nothing else really sticks out to me on it. It does have some great harmonies when they get into the someday when we're dreaming, that part. Mm-hmm. They've got really good harmonies in that. But this song, I really enjoy. I've always loved this song, but I can't really pinpoint anything that sticks out on it to me. This is McCartney's third vocal out of 10 songs. So we're 10 songs in. McCartney's had 3 vocals. George Harrison has had 1, which means John Lennon has 6 so far. So pretty dominated by Lennon so far. But this song, I've always enjoyed it, but I can't really tell you why. I just like, maybe it is the melancholy of the song. It's not a ballad, but it's not fast. It's not super upbeat, but it's a decent song. I enjoy it quite a bit. So that moves us to the next song, When I Get Home. This is another Lennon-McCartney composition written by John Lennon primarily. Lennon has stated, and other people have stated, that the lyrics pretty much refer to the band's hectic schedule at the time about getting home, right? Because they weren't getting home very often anyways. And Lennon has also stated that this song was heavily influenced by Motown and R&B sounds at the time that he was big into. He was big into Smokey Robinson and things like that. This was recorded the same day as the previous song, Things We Said Today, and the opener to this side, Anytime at All. It's kind of funny how, nowadays artists will work on one song for months, and these guys would churn out 3 songs in a day. So, from the time of writing it, going in, recording it, and being done. Okay, ready. This has been covered by a number of bands. Yellow Matter Custard is kind of a famous band in the Beatles lore. The Rustics, Tony Visconti. What are your thoughts on When I Get Home?
So let's see. I kind of got away from our storyline of our young man in search for love. So in the previous song, it seems like he's found that love, right? And he's just really basking in the nostalgia of that moment, right? Well, like you say. So when I get home, I'm like, oh, she's in trouble. And he gets home, he's going to tell her a lot of things. And it's like, wait a second. He's going to tell her how much he loves her. This is a working man. He's working for that money, but all he really wants is to love that girl and get home and tell her all about how much he loves her and how he thought about her all day and how he missed her and to love her up. So good for him. He's found that love, and it's a cute little love song. And it is that real, you can hear that Motown influence, that R&B in it. And it's real well done. It's not like chart topper well done. It's a great song, and it fits the album. What do you think, Justin?
When I Get Home isn't too bad. One thing that I think about this song is it's kind of a heavy song if you really listen to the guitar in it. It's got really thick bass and heavy drumming, and the guitar is very heavy in it. Mm-hmm. It's a pretty heavy early song, and I would suggest any Beatles lovers or go listen to it because it's got good harmonies from all three on it, but nothing on the song really sticks out to me as super amazing in Beatlesdom, but I enjoy the song, and it's just a lot heavier than I always thought of, especially just sitting down here and listening to it once again. And I've heard this song hundreds and hundreds of times, and I didn't realize how heavy it really is compared to the rest. So kind of interesting.
For sure.
So that moves us on to the next song, You Can't Do That, another Lennon-McCartney composition primarily composed by Lennon. You've got Harrison on the 12-string Rick again, and Ringo on drums and congas on this one. This was originally going to be released as the band's sixth single, but once again, it was kicked out by Paul McCartney writing Can't Buy Me Love, which I think was a good choice.
That's a better song.
Yeah, and this actually ended up being relegated to the B-side of Can't Buy Me Love in both the US and the UK. So the lyrics are somewhat autobiographical of Lennon at the time. You know, they're basically referring to his possessiveness and jealousy he felt towards women, which he was very upfront with later in his life. It's a kind of a bluesy song, another song that was heavily influenced by Motown and R&B, according to Lennon, and it's been covered by a number of people. More popular, probably Harry Nilsson was one that did this. So what are your thoughts on You Can't Do That?
This is a little bit of a shocker. This is the jilted part of the love in this young man's story. So he found his happiness. He was so happy with her, and then he comes to find out that she's been running around on him. He caught her talking to him again. I mean, she's been told, "Hey, stop it." So the guy comes home from work, eager to, tell her all the things he loves about her, and she's just out there leaning on the balcony talking to that guy. It's not the first time he's got her talking to that guy. And he bought her so many things. He's been working so hard to give her everything that she wants. She's running around on. That's so sad. And this song portrays that. It sends that right to the core with the lyrics. The music, it's got that perfect Motown R&B, very bluesy feel to it. So they're really capturing this, You Can't Do That. And so, like, to have it Can't Buy Me Love and then You Can't Do That, there's a lot of, being told what you can and can't do, or mostly what you can't do. But it's such a good song juxtaposed with Can't Buy Me Love on the flip side. So I think that was an excellent pairing for the single. I like this song. It's not one of my favorites per se on this album, but it's good. What are your thoughts, Justin?
It's not a bad song. I do like the guitar intro into it. It's once again got thick bass, thick drumming. It's mixed really well. And this is another song that is kind of heavier too, just like the previous song. It's a good song. You Can't Do That. It's funny. He's going to let her down and leave her flat. Mm-hmm. I assume that just means leave her for good.
And not just lay her out.
Yeah, not lay her out and run her over. I'm not sure.
Feel the back of my hand, Toots.
Yeah, but they've had, Lennon's had some of that on his side too, and he's been the first person to admit it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's actually pretty stand up of him in a lot of ways. A lot of people have feelings on that, but this is a good song. It's not bad. Once again, it's not a song I skip, and of course there's very few Beatles songs that I skip anyways, but good song, probably not in the top tier on the album as far as I'm concerned.
For sure.
So that brings us to the last song on the album, I'll Be Back. Another song primarily written by John Lennon. And it's basically said, and I think Lennon said it, that he based this song off of the Del Shannon song Runaway. That's what he based these chords off of. Okay. And the song is very strange because the song has no chorus, but it has two bridges in the song, and it's been covered by a number of people too, the Buckinghams, Cliff Richard, Sean Colvin, many others. What are your thoughts on this last song, I'll Be Back?
Unlucky number 13. Oh, I'll be back. He says, no, come on, kid. There's other fish in the sea. Don't go running back to her. She's a two-time and hussy. You can do so much better, young man, than that. Or can he? I don't know. Because, these are kind of homely guys from Liverpool. So maybe she was the one and only chance that he had at true love. Well, still, once you find that that person's not right for you, move on. Don't be coming back, but they keep saying, I'll be back. It's a good sounding song. It's not one of my favorites on this album, but I think that in this whole storyline of this young man who's searching for love, it's a fair way to close out the album. It's not something that I hate, but it's really not one of my favorites. And I'm not really sure what to think about. I do like the cleverness of doing a song that's got two bridges and no chorus. So I think that's rather clever and creative and showcasing the talent of the Beatles. All in all, not my favorite song. What are your thoughts on this one?
I kind of think it's funny that you think this is a story that they've primarily written out.
I'm writing the story.
almost like it's a concept album of sorts, when these are just all songs they come up with the day and the time and just wrote them, But
Yeah.
I'll Be Back is a good song. I think the thing that's best about it is the harmonies in it. It's a good acoustic song with decent bass, decent drumming. I think the bass and the harmonies in this one really stick out the best to me. I think it's a good way to end the album. But whenever I'm listening to any song, and more specifically, my favorite artists, The Who, The Beatles, The Doors, Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, I hear these songs and I know what song's coming next, because I don't like listening to playlists as much as I like listening to full albums. And this song always closed out this album for me because, of course, I'm a little too young to have experienced the original US album releases. And so when they released them all reissued on CD in the late 80s, that's when I started getting into the Beatles. And so I experienced them as they were meant to be, as the UK albums. And so this song finishes this album. So I don't hear much after this song. I can't think of what song comes next, other than it's going to be the first song on Beatles for Sale, if you were to throw that down. But I think it's a good way to end the album.
It'll probably be a song by the Beatles.
Most likely. Yeah. So do you want to get to winners and losers?
Yes, I do.
Winners and losers.
Okay, Tyler, so after listening to Hard Day's Night, and this is going to be out, of course, side one we did last week and side two today, what are your 2 or 3 losers on this album?
Okay, doing both sides, this is a little difficult. For me, there's not a lot of losers on here. I can only find 2 that I can really stamp as least favorite. The first one I'm going to mention is the last song, Unlucky number 13, I'll Be Back. It wasn't really my cup of tea. Didn't really jive with the song. And maybe I'm, a lyrics guy looking too much into it. That's the first mention. My other least favorite is If I Fell. That one, I think that for being such an upbeat song, it's so upbeat in its tone, but the lyrics are so melancholy. The contrast between the message of the lyrics against the tone of the instruments, there's something about that just causes dissonance in my head. So those are my 2 least favorites. What are yours?
I'm kind of like you. This album is very important to me because it was my first true Beatles album I had. Obviously, I'd purchased their greatest hits, the Red and Blue, first, but this was my first true album. And there's nothing I would kick off this album. I think it's perfect. But if I was to pick two songs that I didn't think fit as well, it would probably be Tell Me Why and When I Get Home. I like both songs. I don't skip them, but they just don't hit home the same way the other ones do on this album. But that being said, I would never remove them from this album because they're a quintessential part of A Hard Day's Night.
Yep.
So what are your favorites? Your favorite 2 or 3 songs on this?
Favorite, I've got 3 full favorites.
Okay.
And A Hard Day's Night is one of my favorites. Such a great song. It's just, even listening to it for critique, to review it, it still holds up so well to anything that I can make up in my head about it. It's a fun song. I can listen to it. And I Love Her is my second favorite. There's something so pure and sweet about that. That song just grabs me. It's a beautiful love song. Well done, Mr. McCartney. For one of his earlier ones, it was amazing. I had such a good time listening to it. The third, Can't Buy Me Love. And that's probably no surprise that one's my third, because, how many times do we say, yeah, that one belongs as a single. That one belongs on the album. It's perfect and it's wonderful. And I've kind of tipped my hand on that one. What are your 2 or 3 favorites? So I'm going to say 3 favorites, or 3 or 4 favorites, Justin.
Well, I'm not going to take the easy way out, although I absolutely love the title song, A Hard Day's Night, and I love Can't Buy Me Love. I'm not going to pick either of those. Mm-hmm. My 3 favorites on this album, let's start out, no particular order, I Should Have Known Better. I think that is like perfect Beatles early sound. I love that song. It brings me to the train scene in the movie every time. It's just a perfect Beatles sound to me. My second favorite is going to be really against you because it was one of your least favorites, which is If I Fell. I like the juxtaposition between the song and the lyrics and the way that sounds. I've just always loved Lennon's vocal in that one, and I think it's an absolutely amazing song. And my third favorite, if I was to name one, we're kind of on spot with that, is And I Love Her. It's one of the earlier Beatles songs I learned how to play on guitar, and I think it's one of McCartney's earliest strong showings as a ballad, I guess, if you would want to call it that. I think the congas in it are different because you don't have the drumming, and I don't know, it's just a different song and not something you would expect from a rock and roll group at the time, and I think that's what made the Beatles so perfect with everything they did, because once they got onto something and made it popular, they moved to something completely new. They didn't just recycle, rinse, and repeat like everybody else did. And that's what I enjoy about the Beatles.
And there's so many bands today that if you've heard one song, you've heard them all by that band, because they all just, every song sounds exactly the same by that band. The Beatles, you can never say that about them.
Well, in the Beatles' 6 to 7 year recording career, whether you dislike them or like them, that's one thing you can't say, is they have very little that sounds similar. Very little. They were not afraid to explore and do different things. So, do you want to get to the album rating?
Yeah, let's do it.
Album rating.
Our rating system for the Beatles, there's not going to be anything less than a 5, so we're 5 to 10 on our rating scale for the Beatles. And I'm going to give this one a 7. I want to rate this one lower, but I can't, because the reason I do want to rate it lower is because I don't really care much for some of the early Beatles, but it's still just really good music, really well done. These guys, such masters of the craft, and they were so young to have this all figured out by this time that I have to respect it and I have to adore it, even though it's not necessarily my cup of tea. I will drink that cup of tea because I know that it's a good cup of tea. I'm not even sure that that's a good analogy, because I'm not sure what a good cup of tea tastes like versus a bad cup of tea. What are your thoughts on this one, Justin?
Well, after you said probably one of the dumbest things I've ever heard you say, which I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
You know, the early Beatles are tough because, to me, a lot of people started with them, so you understand. But a lot of people started with mid to late Beatles, and the early stuff sounds so different, so it's hard for them to grasp. I think, knowing you, how you've been, you gravitate more towards the late Beatles stuff. And I think eventually you will enjoy this stuff as well. And I do. I rate this album a 9.5. It's in my top half of favorite Beatles albums, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's even funny to say that because I don't even know. But it does mean a lot to me because it was so...
Your top half of the Beatles albums includes like 15.
This album means a lot to me because it was the first true Beatles album I had. And it's hard to grade because when it comes into they did later on, the compositions and what they did in the studio was far, far superior to this. These are little songs they churned out in 5 minutes, and somehow they're still played on the radio nowadays.
Phenomenal, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I love this album. It's definitely one of my favorite albums, as most of the Beatles albums are.
Justin, I completely concede that you are right and I am absolutely wrong.
Well, it seems like most people either love or hate the Beatles, which is kind of strange. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that know them but don't even know half the Beatles songs. They know the songs, but they don't know they're actually the Beatles singing them.
Yeah. I'm getting to know the Beatles a little bit more and more by knowing you and, talking about them and listening to them more and getting a little bit more of these backstories. That really helps to define what the Beatles are. I'm sure I never will meet any of them, mostly because the 2 surviving ones are in their 80s at this point. To know a little bit about these guys' lives, it just blows me away, and it does endear them to me. I admire them and respect them for their accomplishments, which are infinitely more than I will ever accomplish with my life. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Justin, for letting me come on.
So that's the Beatles' 3rd studio album, A Hard Day's Night. Please send us an email at classicvinylpodcast@gmail.com. Let us know what you think. But once again, we really do appreciate you listening. It means quite a bit to us that you spend your time with us. So until next time,
See
See you later.
Thank you so much for listening to Classic Vinyl Podcast. And don't forget to subscribe on Spotify or Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Follow us on Instagram at Classic Vinyl Podcast for updates, and also share us with your music-loving friends.